It's Sunday, September 28th, and we are facing the looming possibility of a government shutdown in just a couple of days. Now, if you remember back in March, Democrats had a chance to shut down the government then, and they said that they were going to. Chuck Schumer said that they would support that, and then they all chickened out at the last minute. Not all of them, actually, just a handful of them, just enough to make a difference. Right, when we look at Democrats being the minority party, the one place where they could exercise power was when it comes to the 60 votes required in the Senate. Republicans have to get a handful of Democrats on board or they don't have a continuing resolution to fund the government. Now, after Chuck Schumer chickened out back in March, there were significant calls from a number of grassroots organizations for him to resign. And I'm still ringing that bell, y'all. I think it is worth pressuring our Democratic senators. Chuck Schumer is completely ill-equipped for this moment in time. He is failing us overwhelmingly. Strongly worded letters ain't gonna cut it, Chuck. And same to you, Hakeem Jeffries. So in the face of this upcoming government shutdown, once again, Democrats in the Senate are in a position where they have leverage. If they do not vote along with the Republicans, the government will be shut down. This is a place where they can make demands. I mean, if Republicans were the minority party, they would be doing precisely that. And so once again, we saw grassroots organizations demanding that Democratic leadership say, unless you give us the following things, we will not support a continuing resolution and the government will shut down. We saw Senator Elizabeth Warren come out very early and say that Republicans should restore Medicaid funding and the cuts to the Affordable Care Act funding. As a bare minimum, I would also add rolling back funding for ICE, which is terrorizing communities all over the country, and stopping sending arms to Israel. But I understand establishment Democrats are not going to draw the line for those two things. But we have seen Democratic leadership echo Senator Warren and say that they are demanding that cuts to the Affordable Care Act funding and cuts to Medicaid be restored, or the government will be shut down. And they're saying if Republicans will not give those two concessions on behalf of the American people, then it will be Republicans' fault that the government shuts down. This to me is a pleasantly surprising show of strength, but after what Chuck Schumer did back in March, I have very little faith that they will follow. I'll believe it when I see it. And there's been some reporting over the last 24 to 48 hours that is like, ooh, this is a risky move for Democrats. It could backfire on them really badly because when the government shuts down, then federal workers are going to be laid off fairly quickly because there's not going to be any money to fund any of this. Cool. Does that mean ICE workers are going to be laid off? Does that mean ICE will be shutting down? Now, people have said this is not good for our federal employees. Okay, but you understand that our legitimate federal employees who serve necessary functions have been fired left and right? More than 100,000 of them by the Trump regime, including Elon Musk. Oh, and, also Kash Patel, remember when he said it would take 14 years to hire back all of the FBI agents that he fired, all of the folks that RFK Jr. already fired? The Trump regime is already destroying our federal government and firing qualified federal workers that serve necessary roles. So government shutdown, okay, how is that any different than what they've been doing? So there was some reporting from the AP, I think it was the day before yesterday, that said publicly Democrats say they believe Trump and Republicans will bear the blame if there is a shutdown and that they will eventually be forced to negotiate a compromise. This is a risky bet. Republicans hold the majority in both House and Senate and have shown no signs of relenting as Democrats insist on an immediate extension of health care benefits that expire at the end of the year, amongst other demands. Democrats have adopted a somewhat resigned view of the choice ahead. The country will get worse with or without a shutdown, Schumer said this month, because Trump is lawless. It's an uncertain end game and an about face for Democrats who in the past have strenuously opposed shutdowns. That's because establishment Democrats are so tied to their focus groups and polling. And in the past, when we've had government shutdowns, it has not gone well for the party that created that situation. Which is why we've seen Democrats this time around be like, if we have a shutdown, it will be the Republicans' fault because they are refusing to fund healthcare for tens of millions of Americans. But Republicans don't want to do that, even though they know the cuts to the ACA and to Medicaid are devastating for their own constituents and deeply unpopular. They are doing whatever Daddy Donald wants. And he really wanted those cuts, right? Because he's trying to destroy the fabric of this country and render us weaker, sicker, non-functional, classic authoritarian moves. But it's not just the AP. The Hill had similar reporting like, oh, this is going to be dicey for Democrats. And then there's an exclusive piece out from Politico entitled, "They Will Pay a Huge Price for This. Shutdown Ready Trump Expects Democrats to Blink." I mean, they did blink last time, and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have not shown they have had a lot of fortitude. They have shown that they're going to prioritize their corporate donors and pretending that this is 1985 politics instead of an authoritarian takeover. So yeah, I understand that. But with Trump, it's always a game of chicken. And you have to call his bluff, right? So it's not just Democrats who blink, it's also Trump. That's why they call him Taco, because he chickens out more often than not. So in this instance, Democrats need to hold the line. I know. We are seeing rhetoric from establishment media. We are seeing rhetoric from the Republicans that this will come back to hurt Democrats. Trump officials, speaking on condition of anonymity, said, "We're going to extract maximum pain if there's a shutdown," adding that the Democrats will pay a huge price for this. Of course, Trump's going to say shit like that. All he knows how to do is threaten and intimidate. However, there is some recent polling out from Strength in Numbers that shows that the American people disagree. A new poll that came out on September 26th says voters say they'll blame Republicans for a government shutdown. 52% of U.S. adults agree with Democrats and say they should refuse to sign a funding bill unless Republicans restore health care. So Strength in Numbers conducted a poll asking voters how they would react to 3 different hypothetical scenarios around a shutdown. Number 1, a generic shutdown. Voters weren't given any information about why funding lapsed, just saying that it did and the government was shutting down. And in that scenario, no details, just that we're going into a government shutdown. 34% of respondents would blame Republicans and only 23% would blame Democrats. The second scenario is Democrats protest healthcare funding. Voters were told the government shutdown would be because Democrats refused to vote for a bill that did not reinstate funds for programs such as Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act to pre-July levels. Right, basically, Democrats would not support a continuing resolution that did not reinstate healthcare funding. And we saw a slight uptick in blame of Republicans. 35% of voters would blame Republicans. 32% would blame both parties equally. The third scenario is Democrats protest Trump generally. Voters were told the government shutdown was because Democrats voted against a funding bill as a statement of opposition to President Trump's broader policy agenda, such as immigration enforcement and deployment of the military to U.S. cities. In that scenario, 36% of voters would blame Republicans, 24% would blame both parties equally, and slightly more than previous scenarios, 30% would blame Democrats. Lastly, when voters were asked if they support Democrats withholding votes for a funding bill unless Republicans agree to restore funding for some government healthcare programs, such as Medicaid and the ACA, 52% of voters said yes. And according to that exclusive Politico report, Trump thinks that it is going to hurt Democrats. He's going to make it hurt Democrats if the government shuts down. But if we look at polling from back in 2013, the last time we had a government shutdown, do you know who was actually negatively impacted by that the most? President Barack Obama. And I agree with this assessment from the Strength in Numbers poll that some percentage of Republicans are going to blame Democrats no matter what if there's a shutdown. So if you're looking at polling numbers that show that 23% of voters are going to blame Democrats exclusively, and 34% are going to blame both parties equally, and 34% are going to blame Republicans, if you're in the Democratic Party, you know that, a contingent of American voters are going to blame you either way. You might as well go for the shutdown and try to accomplish your goals, try to create leverage and restore funding, make the Republicans own this. And again, one of the things that Democrats have to understand is that they are fighting not only the Republicans, but they are fighting to get support from their own voters. Democratic voters want to see that their representatives in Congress have a spine, are willing to fight for democracy, are willing to be ruthless. We want all those apathetic Democratic and independent voters who stayed home in the 2024 election to get real jazzed about voting, to get real excited and turn up for you in the midterms. Then you need to give them something to be excited about. You need to give them evidence that you are willing to fight for us. So what do you think about a looming government shutdown? What do you think about the Democrats' strategy? Do they have a real strategy? Are they united? Are they going to be able to hold the line? Are they going to chicken out? Is this going to come back to bite Republicans in the butt? Or is this going to be another instance where Democrats fail to meet the moment? We'll see.